Some houses wait for owners. Ashcroft Manor waited for a little girl. For 20 years. Its gates remained closed. Its fireplaces continued to warm empty rooms every winter. Its gardens bloomed faithfully every spring. And every morning, just before sunrise, a fresh bouquet of white daisies appeared on the front steps. No one in the nearby village ever claimed to have placed them there. No footprints were ever found on the dew-covered path. No carriage stopped at the gates. No visitor was seen leaving before dawn. The flowers simply appeared. As though the house itself refused to believe it had been forgotten. 3 miles away, life moved much differently. The village bakery opened before first light. Shopkeepers swept their doorsteps. Milk bottles clinked softly outside quiet homes. The church bell welcomed another ordinary Tuesday. Nothing about the morning suggested that an old promise was finally about to be kept. Emily Harper almost ignored the letter. It rested neatly among electricity bills, advertisements, and supermarket coupons. The envelope was unusually thick. Cream-colored. Its edges had softened with age, as though it had spent years waiting inside a forgotten drawer. There was no postage stamp. No return address. Only her name. Written in elegant blue ink. Miss Emily Harper. The handwriting stopped her. It wasn't familiar. Yet something about the careful curves of each letter stirred a feeling she couldn't explain. Not recognition. Comfort. Like hearing a melody from childhood whose words had long been forgotten. She stood quietly in her apartment doorway, keys still in one hand, groceries in the other. Outside, rain tapped gently against the hallway window. Inside, everything was still. After a moment, she set the groceries on the kitchen counter. Made herself a cup of tea. Then carried the envelope to the small wooden table beside the window. She didn't know why. But opening it felt strangely important. As though rushing would somehow be disrespectful. The paper inside was surprisingly crisp. Its scent caught her immediately. Lavender. Old books. A hint of cedar wood. The kind of fragrance that belonged in libraries and old country houses. She unfolded the letter carefully. The ink remained perfectly dark despite its age. It read, "My dearest Emily, if this letter has found you, then Ashcroft Manor has decided the time for waiting is over. Do not be frightened if the house remembers you before you remember it. Come before the first autumn rain. The front door will be unlocked. Someone will be waiting. With all my love. Eleanor Ashcroft." Emily read the letter once. Then again. Then a third time. Her tea cooled untouched beside her. One sentence refused to leave her thoughts. "The house remembers you before you remember it." She whispered it aloud. It sounded no less impossible. She reached for her laptop. Perhaps Eleanor Ashcroft was a distant relative. An old family friend. Someone her parents had once known. The search results appeared almost instantly. One headline caught her eye. Beloved author and philanthropist Eleanor Ashcroft dies peacefully at 82. 20 years ago. Emily stared at the screen. Then slowly looked back at the letter. The signature. The blue ink. The perfectly preserved paper. Her pulse quickened. She searched again. Different websites. Archived newspapers. Local records. Every result told the same story. Eleanor Ashcroft had died 2 decades earlier. Yet somehow, a letter signed by her had arrived that morning. Without a stamp. Without a postmark. Without any explanation. Emily leaned back in her chair. Logic searched desperately for an answer. Perhaps someone had mailed it years ago. Perhaps it had been delayed. Perhaps it was an elaborate mistake. Each explanation felt weaker than the last. Rain continued falling outside. The apartment seemed unusually quiet. Then, a gentle breeze drifted across the room. The windows were closed. The letter trembled softly on the table. From somewhere far away, or perhaps only inside her memory, she thought she heard a woman's gentle voice. Not loud. Not frightening. Almost a whisper carried on spring wind. "Come home, little sparrow." Emily looked up sharply. The apartment was empty. Only the rain remained. Yet, without understanding why, tears gathered quietly in her eyes. She had never heard that voice before. And somehow, she missed it. Emily barely slept that night. The letter remained on her bedside table. Several times she reached for it, half expecting the words to disappear. They never did. Every sentence remained exactly as she had first read it. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The city awakened as it always did. Cars filled the streets. Coffee shops opened their doors. People hurried to work carrying umbrellas beneath a pale autumn sky. Everything was ordinary. Everything except the thought that refused to leave her mind. Come home. The words echoed quietly through her thoughts. Not as a command. As an invitation. 3 days later, Emily turned off the narrow country road. The sat-nav had stopped working nearly 20 minutes earlier. The final instruction it managed to give was strangely simple. Continue until the road ends. It had. Now only an old gravel lane stretched ahead. Ancient oak trees arched overhead, their branches weaving together to form a tunnel of gold and green. Sunlight slipped through the leaves in slow-moving ribbons. Her tires crunched softly over loose stones. The deeper she drove, the quieter the world became. The sound of traffic disappeared. Even birdsong seemed distant, as though the forest itself were listening. Then, she saw it. Ashcroft Manor. It stood proudly upon a gentle hill overlooking a silver lake. Built from warm honey-colored stone, the manor seemed untouched by time. Tall ivy climbed gracefully across its walls. Dozens of windows reflected the afternoon sun. Smoke drifted lazily from one of the chimneys. The gardens bloomed with impossible perfection. White roses, lavender, foxgloves, rows of daisies dancing gently in the breeze. The house looked loved, not abandoned, not forgotten, waiting. Emily stepped from her car. A cool breeze carried the scent of cedar, fresh earth, and blooming flowers. She stared at the manor for a long moment. An odd feeling settled over her. Not fear. Recognition. Like returning to a place she had visited in dreams but forgotten after waking. Then, a robin landed quietly on the stone gatepost. Its bright chest glowed beneath the afternoon light. The little bird looked directly at Emily, tilted its head. Chirped once. Then flew toward the front door. Stopping halfway. Looking back. Waiting. Emily couldn't help smiling. I suppose you're my welcome committee. The robin chirped again before disappearing into the gardens. Without thinking, Emily followed. The path curved gently through flowering hedges. The closer she came, the more details she noticed. Freshly polished brass lanterns, clean windows, flower boxes overflowing with color. Someone lived here. Someone cared for this place. She climbed the wide stone steps. There, resting neatly beside the front door, lay a bouquet of fresh white daisies. The petals still glistened with morning dew. Emily's breath caught. The village stories. The flowers that appeared every dawn. They were real. She reached toward them. Before her fingers touched the stems, the enormous oak door opened by itself. Not dramatically, quietly, as though someone had simply been expecting her. Warm golden light spilled into the afternoon. A woman's calm voice echoed gently through the entrance hall. I was beginning to think you'd taken the longer road. Emily looked up. Standing inside the doorway was an elderly woman holding a silver teapot. She smiled exactly the way someone smiles when greeting family after a very long journey. Welcome home, Miss Harper. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Emily remained on the doorstep. The elderly woman stood patiently inside the hall. There was no awkwardness. Only an odd sense that introductions had somehow become unnecessary. At last, Emily found her voice. I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong person. The woman smiled kindly. No. I've been waiting for exactly the right one. Emily laughed nervously. I don't think we've met. The woman's eyes sparkled. We haven't. But the house has. Emily wasn't sure how to answer that. Instead, she glanced behind the woman. The entrance hall was breathtaking. A sweeping staircase curved gracefully toward the upper floor. Sunlight poured through a magnificent stained-glass ceiling. 3 enormous grandfather clocks stood silently against the far wall. None of them had hands. Yet all 3 were ticking. Steady. Confident. Impossible. Emily blinked. She looked again. The clocks still had no hands. Yet time continued moving inside them. You noticed. Emily turned. I'm sorry. The clocks. The elderly woman smiled. Most people don't notice them until much later. Emily pointed toward them. They're broken. No. They simply measure something different. Emily frowned. What do they measure? The woman looked toward the staircase. The moments that matter. Silence settled gently between them. Finally, the woman extended her hand. My name is Edith. I'm the caretaker. Emily shook her hand. Her grip was warm, steady, comforting. You've looked after this place by yourself. For many years. It must get lonely. Edith smiled. The house has always been good company. Emily wasn't sure whether that was a joke. Edith didn't seem like someone who joked often. She stepped aside. Tea. Emily smiled politely. I should probably leave. No. Edith answered softly. You've traveled a long way. Tea first. Questions after. Somehow. That sounded perfectly reasonable. Emily stepped inside. The great oak door closed quietly behind her. Without anyone touching it, the entrance hall smelled of cedar wood, polished oak, and fresh bread. A fire crackled peacefully inside an enormous stone fireplace. The warmth reached Emily immediately. It didn't feel like entering an old mansion. It felt like entering someone's memory. Edith disappeared briefly before returning with a tray. 2 cups of tea. Fresh scones. Strawberry jam. Everything looked as though it had been prepared only moments before Emily arrived. You knew I was coming. Edith poured the tea. The house knew. Emily smiled politely. I'm starting to think the house gets credit for everything. Edith laughed. It was the first time Emily had heard her laugh. It was warm, gentle, like someone remembering an old friend. Only the important things. They drank in comfortable silence. After several moments, Emily unfolded the letter and placed it carefully on the table. I've searched everywhere. Eleanor Ashcroft died 20 years ago. How did she send this? Edith looked at the signature, then smiled softly. She wrote it 20 years ago. But it arrived this week. Yes. How? Edith met her eyes. Because this week. You were ready to receive it. Emily stared at her. Every logical explanation she had prepared quietly fell apart. Before she could ask another question, a deep chime echoed somewhere inside the manor. One note. Rich. Ancient. Beautiful. Edith slowly stood. It seems. The house would like to meet you. She led Emily across the entrance hall. To a quiet corridor she hadn't noticed before. 5 magnificent oak doors stood side by side. Each was carved with a different symbol. An oak leaf. A steam train. An open book. A crescent moon. And the 5th was completely plain. No carving. No handle. No keyhole. Just smooth oak. Emily looked from one door to the next. What are these? Edith's smile faded into something more thoughtful. They are the reason Eleanor asked you to come. Emily reached toward the first door. Edith gently touched her wrist. Before you open any of them, there are 5 rules. Emily looked back at her. For what? Edith glanced down the silent hallway. For remembering. The corridor fell silent. Even the ticking of the handless clocks seemed farther away. Emily stood before the 5 doors, unable to look away from the last one. It was so ordinary. No carving. No handle. No keyhole. Yet it unsettled her more than the others. Edith noticed. Most people look at the first door. You looked at the last. Emily smiled uneasily. It feels. She searched for the right word. Unfinished. Edith nodded. It is. The elderly woman stepped closer to the first door. Her fingertips rested lightly against the carved oak leaf. Eleanor believed every visitor deserved to know the rules before taking their first step. She turned toward Emily. They are not meant to frighten you. They simply protect what matters. Emily folded her arms. I'm listening. Edith smiled. Rule 1. The house never lies. Emily frowned. That sounds comforting. It is. But truth is not always comfortable. She moved to the second door. The carved steam train gleamed softly beneath the afternoon light. Rule 2. The house never takes anything from you. Emily relaxed slightly. Good. Edith looked at her kindly. It only returns what was always yours. Those words lingered in the hallway. Returned. Not given. Emily wasn't sure why they made her chest tighten. Edith continued. Rule 3. You may witness the past. You may never try to change it. Emily nodded. I wouldn't. You'll want to. The certainty in Edith's voice surprised her. She stopped before the open book. Rule 4. Every memory asks for courage. Emily laughed quietly. I thought memories were supposed to make people happy. Some do. Edith smiled. The important ones make us grow. Finally. She stood beside the plain wooden door. For several moments. She said nothing. The silence itself felt like part of the lesson. Then she spoke. Rule 5. When the last door opens, someone else's first door begins. Emily blinked. What does that mean? Edith looked at the smooth oak. I've never been allowed to answer. A breeze drifted through the corridor. No windows were open. Yet the scent of apple blossoms suddenly filled the air. Emily looked around. Did you smell that? Edith smiled knowingly. The house agrees. With what? That you're ready. Emily stared at the first door once more. The carved oak leaf seemed almost alive in the afternoon light. Her heart beat just a little faster. What's behind it? Edith stepped aside. Spring. Emily wrapped her fingers around the brass handle. It felt unexpectedly warm. Almost. As though someone else had touched it only moments earlier. She glanced back. Will you come with me? Edith shook her head. No. This journey belongs to you. What if something goes wrong? The house won't allow it. You trust it that much? Edith smiled. I trust Eleanor. And Eleanor trusted the house. For reasons Emily couldn't explain. That was enough. She slowly turned the handle. The latch clicked. Warm sunlight spilled through the narrow opening. Not the golden afternoon she'd just left behind. This was softer. Brighter. Filled with birdsong. The scent of fresh grass drifted toward her. Emily looked through the doorway. There wasn't another room. There was a meadow. She stared in disbelief. Beyond the threshold stretched rolling fields covered in wildflowers. Butterflies floated lazily through the air. A crystal-clear stream wound gently toward an enormous oak tree standing proudly in the distance. Its branches spread so wide they seemed to shelter the entire valley. Emily turned around. Edith hadn't moved. How? Edith simply smiled. Go on. The house has been waiting. Emily stepped through. The instant both feet crossed the threshold, the door disappeared behind her. Not slammed. Not vanished dramatically. It simply wasn't there anymore. Only endless meadow. She turned slowly in every direction. No manor. No corridor. No walls. Only spring. The breeze carried laughter. Children's laughter. Somewhere nearby. Emily followed the sound through the wildflowers. The air felt wonderfully warm. Bees drifted lazily between blossoms. Leaves whispered overhead. For the first time in years, Emily realized she wasn't thinking about work. Or bills. Or tomorrow. She simply walked. Then, she noticed the swing. It hung beneath the great oak tree, moving gently, back and forth, back and forth. There was no wind. Yet the ropes creaked softly, waiting. Emily approached carefully. Someone had recently polished the wooden seat. Fresh daisies rested beneath the tree. Without thinking, she reached out and touched one of the ropes. Instantly, the laughter stopped. The entire meadow became perfectly still. Then, a little girl's voice spoke behind her. "I wondered when you'd come back." Emily turned so quickly she almost lost her balance. Standing a few steps away was a little girl, no older than 6. She wore a pale blue coat over a white dress. Her dark hair was tied with a faded ribbon. One hand held a small basket overflowing with freshly picked daisies. The other held a tiny wooden bird. She smiled as though she'd been expecting Emily all afternoon. "You took longer this time." Emily blinked. "I'm sorry. I think you have me confused with someone else." The little girl tilted her head. "No, I don't." She walked closer, completely unafraid. "You forgot again." Emily frowned. "What did I forget?" The child thought for a moment, then smiled. "My name." Emily laughed softly. "I'm afraid I never knew it." "You did." The little girl looked toward the giant oak tree. "You always know it. You just remember it at different times." Emily knelt so they were eye level. "Can you tell me where this is?" The child looked around the meadow. Her answer came without hesitation. "Home." Emily felt the word settle somewhere deep inside her. It sounded right, even though it made no sense. The little girl reached into her basket and carefully selected the freshest daisy. She held it out. "This one's your favorite." Emily accepted it. "Thank you." The child smiled brightly. "I knew you'd say that." Before Emily could ask another question, the church bell rang somewhere beyond the trees. The little girl's face lit up. "Oh, Grandma will be looking for me." She took 2 running steps, then stopped. She looked back over her shoulder. Her smile softened, almost sadly. "She said you'd come back one day." Emily's heartbeat quickened. "Who's Grandma?" The little girl pointed toward a small blue-roofed cottage hidden beyond the flowering trees. Then she whispered the name that would change everything. "Eleanor." And before Emily could move, the little girl ran laughing through the meadow, leaving Emily standing beneath the ancient oak tree, holding a single white daisy that somehow felt as though it had been waiting in her hand her entire life. Emily stood beneath the ancient oak tree long after the little girl had disappeared. The daisy rested gently in her hand. Its white petals were impossibly fresh. A faint breeze carried the scent of warm bread through the meadow. Not from the manor, from the little blue-roofed cottage beyond the wildflowers. She looked toward it. Smoke curled lazily from the stone chimney. Golden afternoon light spilled through lace curtains. Someone was home, and for reasons she couldn't explain. A quiet voice inside her whispered, "You've walked this path before." Emily followed the narrow trail. The farther she walked, the more familiar everything became. A weathered wooden fence. A tiny stone bridge crossing a clear stream. Lavender growing beside smooth white stones. She slowed. Not because she was afraid. Because every step awakened a feeling she couldn't name. It wasn't memory. Not yet. It was recognition without explanation. Like hearing someone call your name in a crowded room. She reached the garden gate. It stood open. The hinges hadn't rusted. The flowers had been carefully tended. Rows of daisies swayed beside climbing roses. A pair of old gardening gloves rested neatly on a bench, as though someone had removed them only moments ago. Emily gently pushed the gate wider. It didn't creak. Instead, it made a soft musical sound, almost like a wind chime. The cottage seemed to sigh, welcoming her. The front door was painted a faded blue. Its brass knocker had been shaped like a sparrow. Emily smiled without realizing it. She raised her hand to knock. Before her knuckles touched the wood, the door opened. Warm air drifted outside. Fresh bread, apple pie, tea, lavender. The comforting scents wrapped around her like a childhood memory. An elderly woman stood inside. Silver hair, gentle eyes, a flower-covered apron. She wasn't surprised. Not even a little. Instead, she smiled with quiet joy. "There you are." Emily's heart skipped. I'm sorry. The woman laughed softly. You always apologize before saying hello. Emily stared. We've never met. Haven't we? The woman stepped aside. Come in, little sparrow. The nickname stopped Emily in her tracks. She had heard those words before. In her apartment. On the breeze. Inside her dreams. And now. Here. The cottage felt alive. Copper pots hung above a wooden stove. Fresh bread cooled beside the window. A kettle sang quietly over the fire. Books lined every shelf. Pressed flowers rested between their pages. A little blue rocking horse stood beside the fireplace. Tiny muddy footprints crossed the kitchen floor. Emily looked around slowly. Everything felt loved. The elderly woman poured tea into 2 delicate cups. You still take honey. Emily blinked. I do. I know. Emily sat carefully. Who are you? The woman smiled. Instead of answering, she reached into a biscuit tin. Inside were dozens of tiny wooden sparrows. Each one hand-carved. Each one slightly different. She handed Emily one. You made this. Emily looked closely. The carving was clumsy. Uneven. Childlike. I couldn't have. You were 6. Emily's fingers trembled. The tiny bird felt strangely familiar. As though it had once belonged in her pocket. The elderly woman looked toward the window. You'll remember. She smiled gently. You always do. Outside. A church bell rang 3 times. The elderly woman's expression changed. Not to sadness. To understanding. It's time. Emily frowned. Time for what? The woman looked directly into her eyes. For your first goodbye. Before Emily could ask another question, the cottage began dissolving into warm afternoon light. The walls shimmered. The garden faded. The elderly woman's smile remained. So many people spend their lives searching for home. She whispered. They never realize. Home has been searching for them. Everything disappeared. Emily opened her eyes. She was standing beneath the great oak once again. The cottage was gone. The path had vanished. Only the enormous tree remained. Its branches stretched toward the endless blue sky. Hundreds of tiny leaves shimmered in the sunlight. Then, laughter. The little girl. She ran across the meadow carrying another basket of daisies. This time, Emily noticed something she hadn't before. The child wasn't alone. An older woman walked beside her. Not the woman from the cottage. Someone younger. Elegant. Strong. Her silver hair hadn't yet turned completely white. She laughed as the little girl chased butterflies through the grass. Emily's breath caught. She knew. Without anyone telling her. Eleanor. Years younger. Healthier. Alive. The little girl stumbled. Her basket tipped over. Dozens of daisies scattered across the meadow. Oh dear. She sighed dramatically. Eleanor knelt beside her. Instead of helping immediately, she picked up one daisy. Do you know why flowers aren't afraid to fall? The child shook her head. They trust kind hands will gather them. The little girl smiled. Together. They picked up every flower. Emily watched quietly. She understood now why Eleanor always answered questions with stories. It wasn't to avoid the truth. It was how she shared it. When the basket was full again, the little girl suddenly looked toward Emily. She smiled. Then ran over. Without hesitation, she slipped her tiny hand into Emily's. Her fingers were warm. Real. You came back. Emily looked down in amazement. You can touch me. The little girl giggled. Of course. Why? Because you're me. The words landed like a whisper, yet shook Emily to her core. She stared at the child. At the familiar eyes. The same crooked smile. The same tiny freckle near her left eyebrow. She wasn't simply watching the past. She was meeting herself. Young Emily squeezed her hand. Come. I want to show you something. They walked toward the great oak. Hidden between its enormous roots sat a small wooden box. The child opened it proudly. Inside lay tiny treasures. A smooth white feather. A blue marble. A silver button. A tiny seashell. Pressed flowers. And a folded drawing. Young Emily handed it over. I made this for Grandma. Adult Emily slowly unfolded it. A child's drawing. Crayons. Bright colors. A cottage. A giant oak tree. A robin. And 3 stick figures holding hands. Above them, written in uneven letters, home. Emily felt tears blur her vision. She had drawn it. She remembered the feeling, even if she couldn't yet remember the day. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the meadow. The sunlight dimmed. The little girl looked toward the horizon. Her smile faded. It's almost time. Emily frowned. Time for what? Young Emily hugged her tightly. So you won't be lonely. Before Emily could return the embrace, the child was gone. Only the drawing remained in her hands. The meadow grew strangely quiet. The birds had stopped singing. Even the stream seemed to flow more slowly. Emily looked down. The child's drawing had disappeared. In its place, she held the tiny wooden sparrow from the cottage. She hadn't noticed the change. Yet somehow, it felt exactly right. A voice behind her spoke softly. Some memories leave gifts. Emily turned. Edith stood beneath the oak tree. She hadn't walked there. She simply was. Emily looked relieved. I thought I'd lost everyone. Edith smiled. No. You only reached the end of the memory. Emily looked around. So it's over. The first one. Emily clutched the little wooden sparrow. It all felt so real. Edith nodded. Because it was. Together. They walked slowly across the meadow. As they reached the place where the cottage had stood, Emily noticed something strange. Only its stone chimney remained. Everything else had faded into mist. What happened? Edith stopped beside the old stones. The house remembers moments, not entire lives. Emily ran her fingers across the weathered stone. So every time I come through a door, I'll remember another piece. Edith smiled. If you're willing. Emily looked toward the distant horizon. I met Eleanor. Yes. I met myself. Yes. But I still don't know. She swallowed. Why I forgot. Edith's expression softened. You will. But not today. The breeze carried the scent of apples once again. Somewhere beyond the meadow, a train whistle echoed. Long. Gentle. Far away. Emily looked toward the sound. There had been no railway before. Now, a faint line of silver tracks stretched across the distant hills. Edith followed her gaze. The second door, she whispered, is already calling. The meadow slowly dissolved into golden light. The oak tree faded. The birdsong became the ticking of the manor's clocks. And when Emily opened her eyes, she was standing once more inside Ashcroft Manor. The carved oak leaf on the first door had gone dark. But beside it, the silver train on the second door had begun to glow. Somewhere beyond the wood, a locomotive released a long, lonely whistle. As though a journey that had waited decades was finally ready to begin. The second door stood quietly at the end of the corridor. Its silver train shimmered beneath the afternoon light. Unlike the first door, it wasn't warm. It was cold. Not the cold of winter. The cold of old memories left untouched for many years. Emily rested her hand on the brass handle. She looked back at Edith. Does every door become harder? Edith considered the question. No. They simply become more honest. Emily managed a small smile. I think that's worse. Edith laughed softly. So did Eleanor. The laughter faded. Then she became serious. When you step through this door, you'll witness people making promises. Emily nodded. Will they keep them? Edith looked toward the glowing carving. That depends on time. Emily slowly turned the handle. The door opened with a gentle hiss. Not like wood. Like steam. A cool breeze rolled through the hallway, carrying the scent of rain, coal smoke, fresh newspapers, and something else. Hope. Emily stepped forward. The world dissolved into white steam. For several moments, she couldn't see anything. Then the mist slowly parted. A railway station stretched before her. Rain shimmered against iron tracks. A black steam locomotive waited patiently beneath a cloud of white smoke. Its polished brass reflected the grey afternoon sky. Porters hurried across the platform pushing wooden luggage carts. Children clutched teddy bears. Women held flowers. Men embraced their families. Nobody shouted. Nobody panicked. Yet an invisible sadness seemed to hang over everyone. As though they all knew. Life was about to change. Emily looked upward. A large station clock read exactly 3 o'clock. Its hands never moved. A gust of wind lifted a newspaper from a nearby bench. It tumbled across the platform before stopping against Emily's shoes. She bent to read the headline. Britain declares war. Below it, the date. September 3rd, 1939. Emily's heart sank. She whispered quietly. The beginning. A voice finished the sentence. Of many endings. Emily turned. An elderly stationmaster stood nearby. His navy uniform was immaculate. A silver pocket watch rested in his gloved hand. Unlike everyone else, he was looking directly at her. You can see me. He smiled. Only because you're meant to be seen. Before Emily could ask another question, a train whistle echoed through the station. Long. Deep. Lonely. The stationmaster tipped his cap. They're waiting. Then disappeared into the drifting steam. Passengers began gathering near the third platform. Emily followed them slowly. Rain tapped softly against the station roof. Steam drifted lazily between waiting families. No one noticed her. Except one little girl. She stood beside a wooden bench wearing a familiar blue coat. Her small hand rested inside Eleanor's. Emily stopped walking. Young Eleanor smiled down at the child. She looked almost 30 years younger than before. Strong. Elegant. Full of quiet warmth. The little girl pointed toward Emily. She's back. Eleanor looked exactly where the child was pointing. For a brief moment. Their eyes met. She smiled. Not surprised. Almost relieved. Then she looked back at the child. I told you she'd find her way. Emily's breath caught. They could see her. Not everyone. Only them. The station grew busier. A conductor called for final boarding. Soldiers hugged their wives. Parents knelt to kiss sleepy children. Some smiled bravely. Others couldn't. Hope and heartbreak stood side by side beneath the station roof. A young man carrying a brown leather suitcase approached Eleanor and the little girl. His uniform was neatly pressed. His smile was gentle. But his eyes carried the quiet fear shared by so many others that day. He knelt before the little girl. Will you help Grandma while I'm gone? The child nodded firmly. I always do. And will you keep feeding Oliver? She smiled. He'll complain if I don't. The young man laughed. He certainly will. Emily smiled too. Oliver. Even here. The robin had always belonged to the manor. The man removed a tiny brass compass from his pocket. He placed it gently into the little girl's hands. So you'll always know which way home is. The child held it tightly. I'll keep it safe. I know. He kissed her forehead. Then stood. The whistle sounded again. Boarding had begun. Emily felt her chest tighten. She already knew rain became heavier. Drops danced across the platform roof. The young soldier looked once more at Eleanor. Then at the little girl. I'll be home before the daisies bloom again. The child smiled. You promise? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the grey sky. Then back at her. I promise. Eleanor watched quietly. She said nothing. Only after he boarded the train did she softly whisper. Promises are beautiful things. The little girl looked up. Because they always come true. Eleanor gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. No. Because they give us hope while we're waiting. The train began moving. Slowly. Its great wheels turned with a heavy rhythm. Steam swallowed the platform. The little girl waved with all her strength. So long. We'll be waiting. The soldier leaned from the window. His smile never faded. He kept waving until the final carriage disappeared into the rain. Then, silence. Only the steady sound of falling rain remained. The little girl stood perfectly still. Still holding the brass compass. Still looking down the empty tracks. As though refusing to believe the train had truly gone. Emily wanted to walk over. To comfort her. To tell her everything would somehow be all right. She took one step. The station master's voice echoed behind her. Not every goodbye is meant to be interrupted. Emily stopped. He stood beneath the station clock. Watching the empty tracks. Some goodbyes. He said quietly. Become the reason we find our way home. Emily looked back toward the little girl. The compass in her tiny hands suddenly caught the light. For just a heartbeat. Its polished brass reflected not the railway station, but the front gates of Ashcroft Manor. Then the vision vanished. The station dissolved into drifting steam. The whistle echoed one final time. And Emily felt herself being gently carried back toward the manor. With one question now echoing louder than all the others, Emily opened her eyes inside Ashcroft Manor. The warmth of the corridor felt strangely distant. She was home. Yet part of her remained standing on platform 3. The image refused to leave her mind. The little girl. The brass compass. The promise. I'll be home before the daisies bloom again. She whispered the words to herself. Some promises weren't broken because people wanted to break them. Sometimes, history simply refused to keep them. Edith was waiting exactly where Emily had left her. She didn't ask what Emily had seen. She already knew. Instead, she quietly handed Emily a warm cup of tea. The steam rose between them. Neither spoke. Finally, Emily looked up. He never came back. Edith lowered her eyes. No. Emily's voice trembled. Did he? Edith nodded once. Many families waited. Many letters stopped arriving. Emily looked toward the second door. So the house remembers them. The house remembers everyone who was loved. Silence settled over the corridor. Not heavy. Respectful. Emily suddenly remembered something. The station master. He could see me. Edith smiled. He was one of the keepers. The keepers. Every place that protects memories has someone who watches over them. Emily frowned. So Ashcroft Manor isn't the only place. Edith shook her head. No. But it is one of the oldest. Emily glanced toward the 5 doors. For the first time. They felt less like rooms. More like chapters in a much larger story. That evening, Emily wandered into the library. Rain tapped gently against the tall windows. A fire burned quietly nearby. She wasn't looking for anything in particular. She simply wanted to think. As she passed one of the bookshelves, a single envelope slid onto the floor. She picked it up. Cream paper. Blue ink. No address. Only one sentence written across the front. To the one who keeps waiting. Emily carefully opened it. Inside. There was no letter. Only a pressed white daisy. The petals were perfectly preserved. As though time itself had chosen not to touch them. She looked up. No one was there. Yet somewhere deep within the manor, a grandfather clock chimed once. The house hadn't forgotten. Neither would she. Morning sunlight poured through the stained glass ceiling. Tiny dust particles drifted lazily through the golden beams. The library felt different today. Not larger. More awake. Emily stepped inside carrying Eleanor's letter. She had read it countless times. Yet every reading seemed to reveal something new. As she approached the shelves, something remarkable happened. Books began moving. Not flying. Not magically swirling through the air. One after another. They quietly slid forward by only an inch. Waiting. Almost like people raising their hands. Emily smiled. So, you're choosing me today. A thick leather-bound volume eased itself completely free. It landed gently in her hands. Its cover carried no title. Only a tiny sparrow embossed in gold. Emily opened it. The pages were blank. Then, words slowly appeared. Not printed. Written. As though an invisible pen moved across the paper. H5. Emily insisted every bird deserved a proper name. After naming 37 robins, she finally named one Oliver. Emily laughed aloud. I remember that. Only faintly. But enough. The memory wasn't complete. Just the feeling. Warm sunshine. Fresh bread. Running through gardens. Oliver hopping stubbornly behind her. She turned another page. Age 6. Emily planted sunflower seeds beside the garden wall. She sang to them every morning because she believed flowers grew faster when someone loved them. Emily wiped away a tear. I really believed that. A gentle voice answered behind her. They did. Emily turned. Edith stood in the doorway smiling. The flowers. Edith nodded. They grew beautifully. Because you visited them every day. Emily looked around the endless shelves. How many books are here? Edith walked slowly between them. One for every life the house has protected. Emily looked toward the towering shelves disappearing into the upper galleries. Thousands. Edith smiled. More. Emily gently closed her book. Does every visitor get one? No. Only those who leave part of themselves here. Emily looked down at the sparrow on the cover. I think. She whispered. I already did. As she placed the book back onto the shelf, another one slid forward. This one carried no sparrow. Only a compass. Emily looked at Edith. The station? Edith nodded. The house thinks you're ready. Emily hesitated. What if I'm not? Edith smiled warmly. The house has never confused readiness with perfection. Emily slowly took the second book. The moment she touched it, the library disappeared. Emily found herself seated at a wooden desk. Not in the railway station. Not in the manor. A small study. Sunlight streamed through an open window. Outside, children laughed somewhere in the distance. A fountain splashed gently in a garden. The room smelled of ink, leather, and lavender. Across the desk sat Eleanor. Much younger than Emily had ever seen her. Perhaps 30. She was writing carefully inside a thick journal. Without looking up, she smiled. I wondered when you'd read this. Emily's breath caught. You knew I'd come. Eleanor dipped her pen into the inkwell. I hoped. You can see me. I can. Emily slowly sat opposite her. What is this place? My study. My first year as keeper. She gently closed the journal. The cover bore the same tiny sparrow Emily had seen in the library. So this is the keeper's journal. Emily looked at it with awe. What's inside? Eleanor rested one hand upon the worn leather. Not history. Lessons. Emily frowned. For who? Eleanor smiled. For the next guardian. Silence. Emily felt her heart beating faster. No. She whispered. You don't mean. Eleanor met her eyes. I do. She slid the journal across the desk. Emily reached toward it. Just before her fingers touched the cover, Eleanor gently placed her hand over it. Not yet. Emily looked confused. Why? Because every guardian writes the final chapter themselves. Outside, a robin landed on the windowsill. It chirped once. Bright. Clear. Hopeful. Eleanor smiled toward the little bird. Oliver always knows. She whispered. When someone is finally finding their way home. The room slowly faded into warm afternoon light. And as Emily returned to Ashcroft Manor, she realized something she had never considered before. Perhaps she hadn't inherited the manor. Perhaps the manor had been patiently waiting to inherit her. Emily returned to the library with the feeling that something inside her had quietly shifted. The manor no longer felt unfamiliar. It felt patient, as though every room had been waiting for her to catch up with a story that had never stopped unfolding. She wandered through the halls without thinking, past the drawing room, past the music room, past windows overlooking the gardens. Her feet carried her somewhere on their own. When she finally stopped, She found herself standing before a pair of old French doors. Beyond them stretched a garden she hadn't noticed before. Edith appeared beside her. "I was wondering when the garden would invite you." Emily smiled. "I don't remember seeing it." "You weren't ready." Edith opened the doors. "This one only blooms for those who are." The garden was unlike anything Emily had ever seen. Hundreds of flowers bloomed together despite belonging to different seasons. Cherry blossoms floated above summer roses. Autumn chrysanthemums grew beside spring tulips. Lavender stretched between golden sunflowers. Nothing should have survived together. Yet everything flourished. In perfect harmony. A narrow stone path wound gently through the flowers toward a small fountain. Instead of water, tiny lights drifted upward from its center. Like glowing fireflies. Emily stepped closer. "What are they?" Edith smiled. "Moments." Emily looked puzzled. "The happiest memories leave traces." She reached toward one of the lights. Before her fingers touched it, the tiny glow unfolded into a memory. Young Emily sat on Eleanor's shoulders while trying to hang a bird feeder from the great oak tree. She laughed so hard she almost dropped the hammer. Eleanor laughed even harder. The memory lasted only a few seconds before folding back into light. Emily stood speechless. "There are hundreds." Edith nodded. "Thousands. And every joyful memory eventually finds its way here." Emily looked across the endless flowers. "So happiness leaves footprints. It always has." As they reached the center of the garden, Emily noticed an empty stone bench beneath a flowering cherry tree. Someone had carved 6 simple words into its surface. "Love remembers what time forgets." Emily slowly traced the letters with her fingertips. The stone felt warm. She whispered the words aloud. For reasons she couldn't explain, they felt like something Eleanor had once told her. Not with words, with the way she lived. Just then, Oliver landed on the edge of the fountain. Only, it wasn't Oliver. Or perhaps it was. The robin seemed younger, brighter. Its feathers shimmered softly in the afternoon sun. It looked directly at Emily, chirped once, then flew toward the manor, stopping only once to make sure she was following. Edith smiled knowingly. "I think," she said quietly, "someone wishes to show you something." Emily followed the robin through the quiet halls. It flew confidently, never hesitating, as though it knew every corner of the manor by heart. Finally, it stopped outside a closed walnut door, then disappeared. Emily reached for the brass handle. The room beyond was silent. Sunlight poured through tall windows. An old grand piano stood in the center. Its polished surface reflected dancing particles of dust. Against one wall rested shelves filled with sheet music. Beside the fireplace, a blue music box. The very same one she'd seen before. Emily walked slowly toward the piano. There wasn't a single sheet of music upon it. Only a photograph. She picked it up. It showed Eleanor sitting at the piano. Beside her, a little girl. Both smiling. Both looking at the camera. Emily stared. The little girl was wearing the same blue coat she'd seen in the meadow. On the back of the photograph, someone had written, "Our rainy day concerts." Emily smiled through tears. "I remember. Not the whole day. Just the sound. Eleanor playing softly. Rain against the windows. A child's laughter whenever she missed a note. She gently pressed one piano key. A single note echoed through the room. Then another answered. Not by itself. From somewhere behind her. Emily turned. No one. Yet the melody continued. Slow. Gentle. The lullaby Eleanor had hummed beside the hospital bed. Emily closed her eyes. She didn't speak. She simply listened. For the first time in years, the melody no longer made her sad. It made her feel safe. When the final note faded, the piano lid slowly lifted. Inside, rested a small brass key. Not the key from Eleanor's letter. A different one. Smaller. Older. Emily picked it up. Attached to it was a tiny tag. On it, only 3 words. For later. She looked around the empty room. Later. She whispered. The house wasn't finished with her yet that evening. The manor grew unusually quiet. Rain clouds drifted away. Moonlight poured across the gardens. Emily couldn't sleep. She found herself standing once again before the fourth door. The one carved with a crescent moon. Its silver glow had become brighter than before. Almost inviting. Edith appeared without a sound. You've been thinking about this door. Emily nodded. Since the day I arrived. Edith looked at the moon carving. This door is different. How? It doesn't show what was. It shows what might be. Emily frowned. The future. One possible future. Emily rested her hand against the wood. What if I don't like what I see? Edith smiled gently. Then change the choices that lead there. Emily laughed softly. So the future isn't fixed. No. Hope wouldn't exist if it were. She slowly turned the handle. Moonlight spilled through the doorway. Beyond it, Ashcroft Manor stood beneath a sky filled with stars. The gardens were older. The oak tree was larger. The roses climbed higher across the stone walls. The house looked peaceful. Loved. Lived in. Emily stepped outside. She wasn't alone. A woman stood beneath the great oak. Her dark hair was now streaked with silver. Fine lines rested around kind eyes. In one hand, she carried a lantern. In the other, the brass key from Eleanor's letter. The woman smiled. I've been waiting. Emily felt her breath catch. She already knew. Somehow. She was looking at herself. Older. Calmer. Home at last. The older Emily took a slow step forward. There are still more doors to open. She said quietly. But first. She smiled warmly. You must remember why you were chosen. The moonlight brightened. The future blurred. And Emily realized. The greatest mystery of Ashcroft Manor had never been the magical doors. It was why they had chosen her. Morning arrived wrapped in silver mist. Ashcroft Manor seemed quieter than usual. The handless clocks still ticked. The fireplaces still burned. Oliver waited outside the eastern window as he always had. Yet the house itself felt expectant. Like someone holding their breath. Emily wandered the corridors slowly until she reached the final hallway. 5 doors stood exactly where she'd left them. The oak leaf. The train. The book. The moon. And finally, the plain wooden door. No carving. No handle. No keyhole. Nothing. Only smooth oak glowing softly in the morning light. She stepped closer. Her reflection appeared faintly in the polished wood. But it wasn't today's reflection. She saw herself as a little girl. Then as a teenager. Then as the woman who had first arrived at the manor. Each image smiled gently before fading away. Emily whispered, "Who are you waiting for?" The answer came immediately. Not through the air. Through the wood itself. You. Her heart skipped. She placed both hands against the door. It felt wonderfully warm. Like sunlight resting on old stone. She pushed gently. Nothing happened. She laughed quietly. I suppose it isn't that easy. No. Edith said from behind. It never has been. Emily turned. I've opened every other door. You've walked through memories. You've found hope. You've met the future. Edith smiled softly. But this door cannot be opened by hands. Emily looked back at the smooth wood. Then how? Edith rested one hand over Emily's heart. It opens from here. The words lingered between them. Emily closed her eyes. Not trying to remember. Not trying to solve anything. Simply listening. She thought of Eleanor. The cottage. The meadow. Oliver. The station. The laughter beneath the oak tree. The smell of bread. The music box. The promise. Then, a single tear rolled down her cheek. The door clicked. Very softly. The first sound it had made in 20 years. Chapter 20. In the room beyond the candlelight. The door opened only a few inches. Warm golden light spilled into the hallway. Not bright enough to blind. Only enough to invite. Emily stepped through. Immediately, the manor disappeared. She stood inside a vast room without walls. Thousands of candles floated peacefully in the air. Each burned with a different flame. Some glowed brightly. Others flickered gently. None melted. None smoked. The room was completely silent. Until she heard breathing. Not frightening. Comforting. Like someone sleeping peacefully nearby. Emily looked around. At the center of the endless light stood a single wooden table. Upon it rested Eleanor's journal. Beside it, the brass key, the compass, the tiny wooden sparrow, the pressed daisy. Every object the house had returned to her. Each one represented a memory. Each one a piece of herself. Emily approached slowly. The journal opened by itself. Its final page was blank. Not a single word. She looked around. "Why is it empty?" A familiar voice answered. "So you may finish it." Emily closed her eyes. "Eleanor." She turned. There she stood. Not as a ghost. Not as a dream. Simply Eleanor. Exactly as Emily remembered her beneath the great oak. Kind eyes. Gentle smile. Hands folded peacefully before her. Emily could no longer hold back. She ran toward her. Although there was no solid body to embrace, she felt warmth. Like sunlight after winter. "I've missed you." Eleanor smiled. "I know, little sparrow. I thought I'd forgotten you." "You never forgot. You simply weren't ready to remember." Emily's tears fell freely. "I was angry. I know. I thought you'd left me." Eleanor gently touched Emily's forehead. "I asked the house to carry your grief. Until you were strong enough to carry it yourself." Everything suddenly made sense. The forgotten years. The missing memories. The waiting. Ashcroft Manor had never hidden her past. It had protected her from it. Emily and Eleanor walked together through the sea of floating candles. Each flame brightened as they passed. "What are they?" Emily asked softly. Eleanor smiled. "A life touched by love." Emily stopped beside a tiny candle burning with an unusually bright flame. "It feels familiar." "It should. It was lit the day you were born." Emily stared in amazement. "And when someone dies, the flame doesn't disappear. It simply joins the others." Emily looked across the endless golden room. Thousands, perhaps millions, of tiny lights. No darkness. No loneliness. Only remembrance. Eleanor looked at her kindly. "Do you know why the manor chose you?" Emily slowly shook her head. "No. Because every guardian must first learn what it feels like to be lost. Only then," she said, "can they truly welcome someone home." Emily finally understood. The house had never been searching for an owner. It had been waiting for a guardian whose heart understood loss, hope, and love in equal measure. The blank page in the journal slowly filled with golden handwriting. Not Eleanor's. Emily's. Without a pen. Without ink. Only truth. The final line appeared. "Home is not where memories begin. Home is where love patiently waits for them to return." The room glowed brighter. And somewhere beyond the light, Ashcroft Manor smiled. The golden light slowly faded. Emily found herself standing once again in the familiar corridor of Ashcroft Manor. The floating candles were gone. The warmth of Eleanor's embrace had become a quiet feeling inside her heart. For the first time since arriving, she no longer felt like a visitor. She belonged. The 5 doors stood silently before her. The oak leaf. The train. The book. The moon. And the final plain door. Only now, it was different. The smooth wood had begun to glow from within. Not brightly. Softly. Like sunrise through morning mist. Emily stepped closer. This time, she noticed something she had never seen before. Tiny carvings slowly appeared across the wood. Not elaborate patterns. Names. Hundreds of them. Each one carefully engraved. Each one surrounded by small leaves and flowers. She recognized none of them. Yet every name carried the same quiet dignity. "What are these?" Edith's gentle voice answered behind her. "The ones who came before." Emily turned. Edith looked peaceful. More peaceful than ever before. You mean? The guardians. Emily looked back at the door. So many. Edith smiled. The house has always found the people it needed. Emily gently traced one of the names with her fingertips. What happens now? Edith walked beside her. She rested her weathered hand upon the door. When one guardian remembers completely, another journey quietly begins. Almost immediately, a new name slowly appeared. Letter by letter. As though the wood itself were writing. Emily Harper. Emily's breath caught. I didn't do that. No. The house did. A deep bell echoed through the manor. Not one of the handless clocks. A bell Emily had never heard before. Its sound drifted through every room. The windows. The library. The gardens. The great oak tree. Even Oliver lifted his head outside and answered with a cheerful song. The entire manor seemed to awaken. Fireplaces burned brighter. The chandeliers shimmered. Fresh flowers opened throughout the house. It wasn't celebration. It was recognition. Ashcroft Manor had found its next guardian. Emily looked toward Edith. What happens to you? Edith smiled with the same warmth Eleanor always had. My work is finished. Emily immediately shook her head. No. You can't leave. I've only just found you. Edith reached into her pocket. From it, she removed an old silver pocket watch. Its face carried no numbers. Only a single carved sparrow. She placed it carefully into Emily's hands. I received this from Eleanor. And she received it from the guardian before her. Emily looked up. You've been here all this time? Edith laughed softly. Long enough to watch the roses bloom more times than I can count. Tears filled Emily's eyes. I don't want to say goodbye. Edith gently brushed a tear from her cheek. Then don't. Emily frowned. Goodbye means something ends. She smiled. This is simply where my waiting ends. A gentle breeze drifted through the hallway. Apple blossoms floated around them. The same blossoms Emily had seen the day she opened the first door. When the petals settled, Edith was gone. Not vanished. Not taken. Simply gone. Like a candle whose flame had quietly become part of the sunrise. Emily stood alone. Yet she had never felt less lonely. She looked toward the great front door. Someone was knocking. 3 slow knocks. Not loud. Not urgent. Hopeful. Emily smiled. She already knew. Somewhere, another story had begun. She walked toward the entrance, turned the brass handle, and opened the door. Chapter 23. The last door. The golden light slowly faded. Emily found herself standing once again in the familiar corridor of Ashcroft Manor. The floating candles were gone. The warmth of Eleanor's embrace had become a quiet feeling inside her heart. For the first time since arriving, she no longer felt like a visitor. She belonged. The 5 doors stood silently before her. The oak leaf. The train. The book. The moon. And the final plain door. Only now. It was different. The smooth wood had begun to glow from within. Not brightly. Softly. Like sunrise through morning mist. Emily stepped closer. This time, she noticed something she had never seen before. Tiny carvings slowly appeared across the wood. Not elaborate patterns. Names. Hundreds of them. Each one carefully engraved. Each one surrounded by small leaves and flowers. She recognized none of them. Yet every name carried the same quiet dignity. What are these? Edith's gentle voice answered behind her. The ones who came before. Emily turned. Edith looked peaceful. More peaceful than ever before. You mean? The guardians. Emily looked back at the door. So many. Edith smiled. The house has always found the people it needed. Emily gently traced one of the names with her fingertips. What happens now? Edith walked beside her. She rested her weathered hand upon the door. When one guardian remembers completely, another journey quietly begins. Almost immediately, a new name slowly appeared. Letter by letter. as though the wood itself were writing. Emily Harper. Emily's breath caught. I didn't do that. No. The house did. A deep bell echoed through the manor. Not one of the handless clocks. A bell Emily had never heard before. Its sound drifted through every room. The windows. The library. The gardens. The great oak tree. Even Oliver lifted his head outside and answered with a cheerful song. The entire manor seemed to awaken. Fireplaces burned brighter. The chandeliers shimmered. Fresh flowers opened throughout the house. It wasn't celebration. It was recognition. Ashcroft Manor had found its next guardian. Emily looked toward Edith. What happens to you? Edith smiled with the same warmth Eleanor always had. My work is finished. Emily immediately shook her head. No. You can't leave. I've only just found you. Edith reached into her pocket. From it, she removed an old silver pocket watch. Its face carried no numbers. Only a single carved sparrow. She placed it carefully into Emily's hands. I received this from Eleanor. And she received it from the guardian before her. Emily looked up. You've been here all this time? Edith laughed softly. Long enough to watch the roses bloom more times than I can count. Tears filled Emily's eyes. I don't want to say goodbye. Edith gently brushed a tear from her cheek. Then don't. Emily frowned. Goodbye means something ends. She smiled. This is simply where my waiting ends. A gentle breeze drifted through the hallway. Apple blossoms floated around them. The same blossoms Emily had seen the day she opened the first door. When the petals settled, Edith was gone. Not vanished. Not taken. Simply gone. Like a candle whose flame had quietly become part of the sunrise. Emily stood alone. Yet she had never felt less lonely. She looked toward the great front door. Someone was knocking. 3 slow knocks. Not loud. Not urgent. Hopeful. Emily smiled. She already knew. Somewhere, another story had begun. She walked toward the entrance, turned the brass handle, and opened the door. Chapter 20 FOUR Home Knows Your Name. A little boy stood on the front steps. He couldn't have been older than 9. Rain had soaked his coat. A small leather satchel rested over one shoulder. His eyes were filled with the same uncertainty Emily remembered feeling only days before. He looked up nervously. I'm sorry. I think I'm lost. Emily smiled. No, she said gently. I think you've finally arrived. The little boy looked confused. He glanced back toward the road. There wasn't one. Only morning mist. The path he had followed had disappeared. Just as hers had. Emily stepped aside. Would you like some tea? The boy hesitated. Then nodded. Yes, please. As he crossed the threshold, Oliver flew through the open doorway before settling on the staircase railing. He chirped happily. The boy smiled for the first time. He likes you. Emily laughed. He usually knows people before they know themselves. The boy looked around in amazement. This house feels. He searched for the words. Familiar. Emily nodded. I know. As she led him toward the drawing room, she noticed the bouquet of fresh white daisies resting beside the front door. She hadn't placed them there. Neither had anyone else. Yet somehow, they had returned. Just as they always did. Emily smiled. Some traditions belonged to the house itself. Later that afternoon, she wandered into the library. The keeper's journal rested quietly upon its familiar table. She opened it. The blank page Eleanor had left for her now held beautiful handwriting. Her handwriting. Beneath it, another empty page waited. She smiled. There would always be another story. Another traveler. Another heart searching for home. She dipped the old fountain pen into fresh ink. Then began to write. Today, the manor welcomed a frightened little boy who believed he was lost. He isn't. None of them ever truly are. She paused. Looked toward the window. Outside. The great oak tree swayed gently in the breeze. Oliver soared through the afternoon sky. Children's laughter echoed faintly across the gardens. The house was alive. Not because of its magic, but because love had never left it. Emily closed the journal. The handless clocks chimed together for the first time. Not measuring hours. Not counting years. Only marking one simple truth. Someone else had found their way home. As evening settled over Ashcroft Manor, the last rays of sunlight painted the old stone walls in gold. The manor stood exactly as it always had. Patient. Quiet. Waiting. Not for owners. Not for heirs. But for hearts that had forgotten where they belonged. And if, somewhere in the world, another lonely soul should one day receive an unexpected letter, written in elegant blue ink, inviting them to a place they couldn't remember, the front door would already be unlocked. The fire would already be warm. The tea would already be waiting. Because some houses are built with stone. Others are built with love. And love has a remarkable way of remembering us. Even when we have forgotten ourselves. The end. Have a wonderful and peaceful night. Good night.